Welcome, everyone. Welcome to all of you who are here in person and to the many more of you who are participating via Zoom. I'm Adam Cutler, the senior rabbi here at Adat Israel Congregation, a proud conservative Jewish synagogue of 1,500 families. Without a doubt, the last couple of years have been challenging for everybody. And in many ways, faith communities have come together to support each other, both within their own community and often, like tonight's program, across communal lines. At the same time, I think people of faith have experienced this pandemic perhaps differently than those without. It has sometimes challenged them theologically. It's also been a challenge to faith leaders like myself and our panelists to carry their own communities through this last 2 years while also maintaining a sense of self, ability to lead, and their own faith. I am thrilled that this evening we have 3 phenomenal panelists to share their words as we move from hurt to hope. Our first speaker will be Imam Imran Ali of the Tariq Islamic Center. He has been the Imam there for over 20 years. And I can tell you, that is not an easy job. Imam Ali is also a chaplain with law enforcement here in Toronto. Next to speak will be Pastor Judith James of the Revival Tabernacle Church, which I pass all the time because my parents live just there, a few blocks away. Among her many accomplishments, Pastor James is the founder of the Beautiful Foundation, which is an organization supporting survivors of domestic abuse and substance abuse. Our third speaker will be Rabbi Howard Morrison, Senior Rabbi of Beth Emet Beis Yehuda, my synagogue growing up. He wants you all to know that the Red Sox won last night, and that he is, and I can say this personally, and because my parents are members of that synagogue, a wonderful human being and a phenomenal rabbi. Finally, at the end of the table is a face, if you could see the whole face, that I think all of us would recognize. Member of Parliament for York Centre, Ya'ara Sachs. And her office has helped put together this afternoon's program. The format's going to be that MP Sachs will share a few words, followed by a brief video. Our panelists will have an opportunity to each speak for a few minutes, followed by Ya'ara Sachs. We'll then have a conversation with the panelists, myself and Ya'ara Sachs as moderators, and then we'll open it up for a few moments, questions from those of you who are here, as well those of you who are participating from home. The chat function is open on Zoom, so if you would like to ask a question of our panelists toward the end, please do so through the chat. It's my pleasure to welcome Member of Parliament for York Centre, Ya'ara Sachs, to the podium.
Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here, and I think this might actually be my first in-person event since being elected. So thank you. Is this on?
Just push it down.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, and we'll try. It's hard with the masks. So it's wonderful to be with all of you, both in person and those who are on Zoom with us this evening. It's my first in-person event since being elected, really, with the community. So it's very special to me that we can do it here, and I want to thank Rabbi Cutler and the Adat Israel community for hosting us this evening. It wouldn't be a Toronto or a Canadian event without a land acknowledgement, so I'd like to say that we are speaking to you today from the riding of York Centre in the city of Toronto. that falls under the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and many other First Nations that fall under Treaty 13, we pay tribute to all Indigenous peoples who have paddled these waters and whose moccasins have walked this land that we also know as Turtle Island. And we thank them for creating this space for us all to become a community. So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who is one of my favorite teachers and a beloved teacher for so many, says that if religion is not part of the solution, it will certainly become part of the problem. And this is why interfaith dialogue, an opportunity to share our hopes, to share our hurts, and to share also our love for our communities and one another in a space of healing. It's been an undeniable fact for all of us that these last 2 years have been exceedingly hard. We've lost loved ones, we've lost opportunities to be together, to celebrate our moments of joy and milestones. And each time that we face these challenges, for many of us, the place to come home to would be our community religious spaces and to be with our faith leadership. And the distance has been large, not just physically, but emotionally for many. And as we start to emerge from this time into a new space in the pandemic, we felt it was really an important time to come together, whether it's on Zoom or in person, to share what we hope for one another. We're in a unique month where Passover, Ramadan, and Easter all fall within the same time period. So what better opportunity to come together as a community? It was important for me as the Member of Parliament to convene us. The wonderful panel that's here came to us shortly after I was elected and said, we'd like space within York Centre for interfaith dialogue. And it wouldn't be without thanks and gratitude to everyone on the panel tonight who have committed to making tonight happen and ongoing conversations. And I shared that with our Minister of Diversity and Inclusion, Minister Hussein, who was blown away by the fact that this community has really committed to interfaith work. And I'm honored to share a brief message to all of you from Minister Hussein on the importance and the value of this kind of community work. So thank you all for coming, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. As Minister of Housing, Diversity and Inclusion, it's an honor for me to speak to all of you today as you come together for this important event. Thank you to my friend and colleague MP Yara Sachs and to the leaders of the Jewish, Christian and Muslim communities for hosting this interfaith gathering, recognizing and celebrating various religious holidays in York Centre and across Canada. Today, you are gathered at Adath Israel, a Jewish synagogue that has functioned as a center for religious and social events, kingship and harmony for over 100 years. In the spirit of Ramadan, Easter, Passover, and many other religious commemorations during the month of April, we are here to share an open discussion on hurt, hope, and healing. Diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice, and no Canadian, regardless of race, gender, or religious belief, should be discriminated against. C'est pourquoi notre gouvernement s'est engagé à créer un avenir meilleur, plus équitable et plus inclusif pour chaque Canadien. The work we do together today is a sign of our mutual care and respect, and it will make all the difference for the weeks, months, and years to come. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by praising God Almighty and to greet you with our special greetings of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And if your Arabic is like my French, it means may the peace and blessings of God Almighty be with you. I'd like to thank MP Sachs and her team and my colleagues and our host, Rabbi Cutler, for doing something unique, and that is today we're planting an important seed, a seed of interfaith dialogue. So what we're doing here today is launching something unique, which is only going to snowball or be that domino effect to work within our community where faith groups led by faith leaders are going to work together for the common good of humanity. That's why I took the time to be here. In my car, I was coordinating another program to ensure that there was a host so that I can be here. I wanted to show how important this is, and that's why I chose to be here. In addition to that, as Muslims, we are observing the glorious month of Ramadan. It is a pillar of Islam, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It is also a unique time of the year because Ramadan follows the lunar calendar, and what a great moment to have these Abrahamic faiths celebrate and observe in one month. We have Ramadan, we have Easter, we have Passover. It's unique. We don't get to do this all the time. And so when I was introduced to something like this, you can imagine how much it meant to me. And usually, and I'm saying this to you here and those who are watching, I'm always very funny. I don't do stand-up comedy, so please don't, think that I am. But I always like my sermon to be funny. And coming here, it's easy to attract me if you have food. But today there's no food. Even if you had food, I couldn't be partaking because I'm fasting. But it's again the importance. And to join with these faith leaders, why? Because in each of our faith, fasting is important. We may do it differently, but we have to do fasting in the faiths we are representing or being part of here today. And while we do it differently, the goal is the same: to get closer to our Creator and to make us better human beings to ourselves, our families, and our community. So I'm delighted to be here. I know we have a limited time, and when you give the preacher a mic and says 5 minutes, you know that's not going to work. But I'm going to keep on time, respecting Rabbi Cutler and the others. But this is my humble message to begin. I know there are some questions coming, but I want you to know that we're delighted to be fasting this month because for 2 years we couldn't be in the mosque for the month of Ramadan. This year it's different. And so that is why for 2 years we were hurting. We find this month, joining with our friends from the Christian faith and our friends from the Jewish faith, that we're turning to hope this month. And it's a process of healing that we all need, even though we're going to do it differently. For when we all heal as human beings, then there's going to be more compassion for each other. And when we get to the 4-way stop, we're going to do as you saw in the ad: no, you go, oh no, you go, oh no, you go, oh no, you go, because we're good Canadians and we're people of faith. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Are you able to hear me clearly? Okay, awesome. It is such a delight to be here. So again, I want to give honor to MP Yara Sachs and to Rabbi Cutler and to my gracious friends who are on the panel with me, and to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. This group means so very much to me because I believe that our faith organizations are like a triage center for our communities. So the more that we can get together, the more that we can find harmony with each other, the more that we can find areas that we agree on as opposed to areas that we disagree on, is the better that we can be for each other. And so when I say a triage center, like my friend Imam Ali was just saying, the last 2 years have been extremely difficult. And so, you know, it was a place where our people didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't know what to do. And if our faith organizations sit as a triage center where people come to get healing, to get counsel, to get refuge, to seek, you know, a safe space, just to cry, to pray, to receive the sermon, because those doors were shut, many have been hurting for far too long. And so I'm grateful for this organization. I'm grateful for this moment in time where we can come together and find areas that we can really stand in unity on. And so even with the title tonight, From Hurt to Hope Through Healing, we literally sat in a meeting and each one of us participated in coming together with that name. It wasn't just one person coming up with the idea, but all of our hearts were singing the same song. We were in the same choir singing the same song because we know that people hurt. And in order for us to journey through that, the faith, our organizations are so very important. And so in MP Sachs's opening, you know, she made a very strong statement that she had heard that if religion isn't the answer, religion is the problem. Something like that she said, right? And so our hope is that religion is the answer, that our faith communities are the answer to give people a space where they can be heard, where they can cry without judgment, where they can receive love and hope through healing. Thank you so very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Good evening, MP Sachs, Rabbi Cutler, my colleagues, to those here in the synagogue, and those joining us on Zoom. I am elated to be part of this amazing panel and to address our theme for tonight, entitled From Hurt to Hope Through Healing. Given that the faiths being represented tonight are celebrating respective sacred seasons right now, I want to briefly address our topic from the lens of Passover, a Jewish holiday which begins in a few days. While the narrative of the holiday speaks to the distinctive Jewish historical experience, it also speaks with a universal message for all people. On Passover evening, Jews celebrate a Seder, a prescribed order of ritual events, and we tell a story each year from a book called the Haggadah. The series of tellings in the Haggadah actually takes us through a journey of hurt, hope, and healing. Part 1 of the Passover Journey is an annual retelling of the hurt of Israelite bondage, a period of which lasted for hundreds of years in ancient Egypt. Ultimately, a transition takes us to a place of hope and healing, to a combination of food symbols, stories, and prayers. Symbolic foods include eating matzah, a flat bread, known in the beginning of the tale as bread of affliction, but by the end of the experience as bread of freedom. In between, we eat an admixture of chopped apples and nuts called charoset, sweetness, and white horseradish, maror, bitter herbs, to physically taste our going from bitterness to sweetness. The first half of the Seder culminates with a festive meal. Our ancestors achieved their freedom, and we celebrate our freedoms today. The second half of the Seder reminds us that our freedoms can be temporary and be removed from time to time. Ultimately, we strive for a messianic utopian freedom for all people and for all time. It is interesting to note that the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, literally means in distress. When we replay the ancient story of bondage, I ask those gathered with me, what are the sources and causes of your distress today? How are you hurting? How can you hope to improve your situation? What kinds of healing do you need in your lives? Physical, emotional, spiritual? Each and every one of us is hurting from some kind of distress in our lives. What do we need to do to experience our own transformation, our own individual, proverbial Passover story of going from slavery to freedom, from pain to praise? Can we find hope from a belief of God's presence in our lives, which can come from above and or from within? Some of us may be hurting from the loneliness and anxiety brought on by 2 years of the pandemic. Some of us may be hurting from poor health, economic challenges, physical and or spiritual challenges. Some of us may be hurting from the surges in anti-Semitism, racism, Islamophobia, other forms of bigotry and prejudice. Some of us may be hurting from war and evil in the Ukraine and in different parts of our world. Know that you need not feel alone and isolated. Your own faith community is here to support you. And know that those who believe in multi-faith and multicultural initiatives care for all people in our Canadian community. I conclude with a petitionary prayer for healing, which is recited almost every single day, morning, afternoon, and evening in the Jewish liturgy. Heal us, God, and we will be healed. Save us, and we will be saved. For you are our praise. Bring complete recovery for all our ailments. For you are God, sovereign, the faithful, and compassionate healer. Praised are you, God, who heals. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Okay, well, firstly, thanks to each of you for such important opening thoughts that are helping anchor us as we join together tonight to have our discussion. And, you know, I get asked, why do this work? Why go into this space of interfaith work? And the primary purpose is to learn from one another, to learn how to be open with each other, to be able to share our strengths, but also our vulnerabilities, so that we can really create, you know, Canada is such a beautiful mosaic of religions and faiths and people who come from so many different places in the world, and we choose to make this place home. But when we share space, do we truly share it? Do we truly open ourselves to the opportunity to learn one another's reality, to understand it, and also be able to embrace it even when those moments are challenging. And we faced so many challenges this past year, or 2 years rather. So that's why we come here tonight. And we come here in a season where each of our faiths are in a season really of healing, revelation, and community cohesion. Each faith, whether it is Easter, whether it is Passover, whether it is Ramadan, each of us in our practices are going through this journey right now. I'd like to start tonight's learning with a Jewish tradition in which we have Ilui Neshamot, the elevation of spirit and soul. We dedicate tonight's learning to the father of Pastor Judith. Audley James led his community with faith, with love, and tremendous compassion. He was a beloved member of this community in York Center and a beloved member of his church. And we can take the opportunity to learn together, to celebrate one another, and also cherish the memories of those who we have lost and who we still love. I'll open tonight's questioning with a thought from the prophet Jeremiah, who said, "Seek the welfare of the city to which you have gone and pray to God on its behalf, for in its peace and prosperity you will find peace and prosperity." So how can we maintain our own identities while we share in the peace and prosperity that is available? And prosperity isn't necessarily physical or tangible. We can be prosperous in our hearts. We can be prosperous and generous in our compassion and our patience, in our charitable acts. And we can be prosperous in our opening of our spaces and our communities for so many. As a child, I was raised on the idea that the temple, during the holiday seasons like Passover, could hold everyone, that the walls of the temple could literally expand to create space for everyone who arrived. And I think this year, particularly the month of April, with Ramadan and Easter and Passover coming together, that we have a unique opportunity in learning tonight and sharing with one another to understand what expansiveness can look like. So I'm going to pass it on now to Rabbi Cutler to help us in asking some questions of our wonderful leadership here tonight, and then open the floor to our audience here in the room and on Zoom. Rabbi Cutler?
Thank you. It was, I think, a year and a half ago, sometime towards the beginning of all of this, when I was interviewed, I believe on the radio, and the interviewer asked me, what brings me strength when I'm down? What gives me hope when I'm feeling low? What do I do? And I responded that I pick up the phone and I call one of my congregants. Because for me, that human connection was not just important for the person on the other end of the line, but was exceedingly important for me as well. And so I'm going to pose the question to you that I was asked. What brought you hope? What gave you strength when you yourselves were feeling down? I'm going to start by asking Rabbi Morrison.
Rabbi Cutler, my good friend and colleague, I will always be grateful to you for calling on me first. I want to first begin my response by actually responding to what MP Sachs just said from the podium. As she was speaking, I was inspired by a couple of quotations from Jewish tradition. How do we balance and intertwine the particular loyalty to our own personal faith and respect, validation, and cooperation with those of other faiths? I'm reminded of Aaron the priest, the brother of Moses in the Bible, who on the one hand was a pious, strict officiant of the rituals that were unique to his faith, in the ancient tabernacle or temple. At the same time, it is said of him in our tradition, "Be amongst the descendants or disciples of Aaron the priest, loving peace, pursuing peace, loving all people." In my estimation, it is not a conflict. It is a responsibility and a privilege to always be able to balance authentically loyalty to one's own personal faith heritage and to work in harmony with those who represent other faith traditions. And I'm reminded of a verse from our prophets that one day in that ultimate beautiful future, the house of prayer will be one house for all peoples. We pray for a day to come, hopefully in the near future, not the distant future, when all faith-oriented people can pray in one house. And our day-to-day efforts like today are steps in that direction. Rabbi Cutler, over these past 2 years, when I have gotten down, I've been brought right up. Because while I'm a rabbi of a congregation, and I might be the senior rabbi, my 1,000 families are my rabbis. And every single member of my Beth Emet community brings me up, and they teach me much more than I teach them. I am a humble student in front of my congregation. And when I have a relationship with you, Rabbi Cutler, your family, over the last 2 years with MP Sachs, with my 2 new friends, one of whom her father was a dear colleague and friend of mine, this kind of sharing tonight are pick-me-ups for me. They inspire me and lift me to new heights if and when I do feel a bit down. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Pastor James.
Wonderful. Again, good evening, everyone. So again, the question was, how did I find hope during these times? And, it's the same, I think, with Rabbi Morrison. You get strength from the congregation and the people that you serve. And, when they weren't able to come into the building and we weren't able to see each other face to face, I made it a personal mission of myself to make sure that I was in the office and just calling the people. Calling the members, finding out how they're doing, if they need anything. What can I agree with them in prayer for, even over the phone? And by doing that and being acquainted with their daily trials and possible tribulations and hurts and even triumphs in that time, it caused me to understand that, no matter where you are in life, no matter which faith you find yourself under, we are all human. We all bleed red. We all hurt. We all need a shoulder to lean on. And so it was doing that caused me to understand the importance, even in the leadership role, that the greatest leaders are first the greatest servants, and that we serve our people with compassion. And that's what gave me hope in doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think in all our beliefs, we have something unique in that when one door closes, another opens. And while the doors of our places of worship had to be closed for the right reasons for 2 years, who ever thought of Zoom?
Right.
And that was a door, that was an opening for us to keep in contact with our congregations. But as a faith leader, I had to go a step beyond that and ensure that I was able to take care of myself in order to take care of others. And so I relied a lot on my colleagues, whether they be from the same faith, or my colleagues in the interfaith circle and the multi-faith circle. Because what we did indirectly was that we learned from each other and we gained strength from each other without having to enforce any religious beliefs. All we did was talk how we dealt with our communities during these times, and we all benefited from each other in implementing many of the discussions we had in our own places of worship. And I think that made me felt as if I could now help myself and help my congregation. Thank you.
Thank you. Before MP Sachs asks her question, there's one story briefly I'd like to share. I was about to call one of my congregants, and I was a little anxious about the phone call. Even though I usually like connecting, it makes me feel good. I was anxious because I knew that she lived in a retirement home and she hadn't been allowed out of her suite in 3 weeks at that point. And she lived alone. And I just couldn't fathom what her life was like to get a knock on the door and someone leaves the food by the door and you have to wait the 30 seconds so the person delivering the food can leave before you open the door. And I call her up, and I'm anxious, and I'm not feeling great, and she picks up the phone, and she's having a grand old time. And how? Why? Well, she figured out how to use the iPad, and she connected with classes, and her grandchildren, and her children, and her friends. She tried new things. She stretched herself. And I haven't forgotten her since. And she's still on my mind. And that has always helped bring me up. And I've always been surprised by how people are doing. Because sometimes the people we think are doing poorly are actually doing quite well. And I've experienced that the people who we imagine are actually should be doing well, they're employed, they have families, they're seeing people. Sometimes those are the people who are actually having the most difficult time. So, MP Sachs, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Cutler. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, because I think we need to, for those of you who know me, you'll know that I like to delve into the harder conversations because I believe they're important. We've borne witness in the last 2 years to upheavals, whether it was the Black Lives Matter movement, the rise in anti-Semitism that has left a community feeling vulnerable in ways that it hasn't in many years, and acts of Islamophobia, including the tragic loss of the Afzal family last June. And each of those incidents, each of those moments created deep hurt. But also when the chasm opened, as you said so rightly, Imam Ali, it creates opportunities for doors to open. I think every community has learned how to be more open with each of those moments of hurt that we had to bear witness to, and we had to bear witness to in the last 2 years. And I think what I'd like to ask each of you is, each of you had to contend with this hurt in your communities. And how can we come together to be there as part of the healing and the learning from these difficult moments? So if I may, I'd like to start with Imam Ali this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to say, first of all, I like the intro before the question. One of the reasons, as I said earlier, why I really wanted to be here, it's because I believe in faith. And when I say that, I'm not going to be naive to not realize that there may be some people who choose not to have a faith, and I respect them for their choice. But at the same time, we also have those who claim to be within a faith and they don't represent the faith as it should be represented. And so you can imagine what's happening in me at many times. But I believe that faith leaders will play a role in the continuous guidance of their congregations, because I believe that faith will triumph. And our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is reported to have said, "No one should profess belief until he loves for his brother that which he loves for himself." And so I really believe that amidst the hurt we have faced and the healing we're looking towards, amidst all that MP Sachs mentioned happening in various communities, I don't want to belittle what has happened, but as a person of faith, there are times when we do believe in divine decree for certain reasons, from which we should ensure that we allow to become the foundation to better ourselves, that does not reoccur in any way possible. And so we don't want to see any hate in any form to any faith. Only last night, one of my members, one of the congregants, also happened to be a family friend, sent me a TikTok video with someone chose his young daughter's photo with dressed innocent picture of her with a TikTok music and something like a grenade going off, referring to her as a terrorist. And you can see the innocent picture of this kid that today, when I spoke to the dad, I said, please don't share it with anyone else because of her innocence. And now that matter has to be investigated. This should not happen, in any way to anyone, because the hurt that's going to happen will be so difficult to remove. But I believe in faith. And so I'm delighted that I'm here, because I'm going to go tell that family, and they might even be watching, and I'm not saying because they're watching, so, but I want them to know, right, what is happening here, to ensure that something like that doesn't happen to any girl or any boy or any human being, regardless of faith. Thank you.
Pastor Judah.
As I'm sure it is with each of us, it was very difficult to face the challenges of what MP Sachs said about the Black Lives Matter movement, all the hate, the racial hate that was happening in the Black community, the Christian faith community, and you can't reach out. You can't go to their homes. You can't, I wondered, even when the George Floyd thing happened in the States, that was in the States, but here and even in Canada, I hoped that the family was able to rally around them somehow. Because again, when anything is done to human life, and then specifically I can speak about the Black community, it is very painful when hate is demonstrated to the degree of taking a life. And I know that we can all be acquainted with that in our faith communities. It is horrible. And you know, when there is such oppression and suppression in a community where you feel so misunderstood, when you just want to be heard and you are targeted because of the skin that you're in or the garments that you wear or the God that you call upon, it's a space of hatred that needs to be exposed. And the only thing that can drive out darkness is light. And the only thing that can drive out hate is love. And so in our communities, that's what we try to do, is we try to expose the lie and bring in light and demolish the hate by sharing love, spaces of love. Even like we were saying over the Zoom, you know, thank God for Zoom, because we were able to reach out to families in the States that we may not have been able to do so readily, to speak a word of love and hope. Because again, the only thing that can drive out darkness is light, and the only thing that can drive out hate is love.
I want to begin my response with a story from the early chapters of my rabbinate. In the 1980s, when I was in my 20s, I was first introduced to interfaith or multi-faith cooperation when I entered the United States Armed Forces chaplaincy, where there were 59 students in the class. 29 called themselves Catholic, 29 called themselves Protestant. There were no Muslim students at the time, sorry. And there was me. And I met the only other Bostonian in the class. The Red Sox thing was mentioned because I grew up in Boston. And I became best friends with a Catholic priest. We are best friends to this day. He has a picture of me in my talit, my prayer shawl, on his desk, and I have a picture of him in his regalia on my desk. Some 15 years later, in the 1990s, when I was visiting him in Boston, he had a crisis of faith because there was a scandal going on that you all know about in terms of the priesthood in Massachusetts at the time. We took a 3-hour walk together. He questioned his place in the church. And I asked him, do you believe that God is pure? He said, yes. Do you believe that your Christianity is pure? He said, yes. And I said to him that I think the Catholic Church needs you now more than ever before. And he has stayed in the priesthood ever since, to this very day. And in my friendship with him, I have learned what is for many people a challenge, for me too, but it's really a gift. And I call it empathy. Can we truly be authentically empathetic to those who have a different faith, a different definition of God, a different skin color? The Bible tells us, love thy fellow as thyself. The Bible tells us, love the stranger. The Bible tells us that every man and woman is created in the image and likeness of God. That is a universal teaching. This gathering tonight for me is part of a larger goal. We have to build bridges, and we have to knock down walls. And we have to care about each other's pain. When the mosques needed support, I remember rabbis and synagogues performing rings of solidarity at a very challenging time. That to me is an example of empathy. And I just hope and pray that when anti-Semitism rears its ugly head, Christians, Muslims will join the Jews in fighting anti-Semitism. When Islamophobia rears its ugly head, I hope that Christians and Jews will join Muslims in fighting Islamophobia. And when racism attacks or anti-Christian sentiment attacks, Muslims and Jews must join their Christian neighbors in fighting these attacks. Pastor Martin Niemöller said during the years of the Holocaust, they came for this group, but it wasn't me, so I didn't stand up. They came for another group, but it wasn't me, I didn't stand up. Ultimately, they came for me, and there was nobody left to stand up. We need to stand up for each other and show God-given empathy long before we're the last ones standing up.
I'm glad that you spoke about empathy, and you shared a story about how one spiritual leader from one faith can lift up somebody else, another spiritual leader in another faith. I'm glad you brought it up because I think there are moments, and I share this with love, there are moments when we fail to do that. And I think I know a moment for the Jewish community where we felt failure was 3 months ago during and after the hostage taking at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. Thank God it resolved in the way that it did. But I can tell you as someone who after Shabbat heard the news and watched in horror, that I heard silence afterwards. And when I went online in my rabbi groups, they shared the same. That is, they were feeling pain and they were very scared. And they were not hearing from their friends and colleagues in other communities. And I put this out there not as criticism to anyone on this panel, but as a challenge to share, when have we failed in this interfaith effort? And how can we be better? Pastor James, if you want to go first.
Oh, where have we failed and where can we do better? My goodness, I think we have failed in understanding the need of compassion. We think it's each other's personal problem or faith issue or cultural issue. But like I said before, Rabbi Cutler, I think when we can understand that it's not about race, we're the human race. And if we can have compassion to our brothers and sisters of different faiths, different denominations, different ethnic backgrounds, and we can have compassion on each other outside of who you call on God, that's where the strength lies. So I think it's having compassion or empathy, as we called it earlier. And I think we can do better by doing exactly that, Rabbi, by calling each other up. Now we have contact, right? Connect with each other. In our individual faith organizations, pray for our Muslim brothers and sisters, pray for our Jewish brothers and sisters, and likewise praying for each other. Showing support and sending, resources, finances, where we can send them in order to help the different communities. And just understanding that when you bleed, I bleed.
Imam Ali?
Thank you. Again, I'm so mesmerized with the intro before the question. Both of you, thank you so much. And I'm going to kind of hit the nail on the head by being respectful to everyone, but at the same time not calling out anyone. I think faith leaders have not done enough on their own by meeting each other to have really frank and honest discussions. We know that there are things we're going to differ on with regards to our beliefs, and we're not going to fight over that. But we have so many things that we can work together where we can make a difference. And we haven't done that as much as we should. You know, not a simple thing, but something that's staring us right in front of us is, how did we deal with the pandemic? When it came to vaccination, did we work together for vaccination? Did we work together for proof of vaccination to enter places of worship? Like, there's so many things we could have done that we did not do, and I feel personally that we did fail ourselves. We did fail our congregation to an extent. I feel sad because right now we know the pandemic is there. We know the virus still exists. We're not going to go into how aggressive it is, but we still have to take precautions. Yet we have lifted those precautions because as faith leaders, we have not become a force to reckon with. And so decisions are being made for our congregants, and we're kept behind. And I don't think I'm hinting at MP Sachs here, but we need to be at the table as faith leaders when decisions are being made that are going to affect our congregants. And this is for, you know, all elected officials, for them to know that. But unless we put ourselves together, right, as faith leaders, they're going to look at each one of us and say, well, you're just one person, or you're only three of you, where are the rest? And I think that should be some failure to be felt. Why? We can still work on how to assess it, but at the end of the day, I think many of our congregants are looking at us and saying, well, you guys didn't really do enough, and they may have a right to believe that. Not that they're saying it, and I hope they're not, but at the end of the day, in their own private moment, they probably could have asked, well, what did you do? And they have that right to ask, and we really haven't been able to do a lot as faith leaders, either because we were not out there united, or we were kept back for whatever reason. But that's why, again, I think tonight is so important, because of what you did here, MP Sachs, and the team that's here at the table, and the colleagues, I have been pushing to have a faith leaders power hour, where faith leaders can come, you know, Zoom or however, safe space, and we can just provide peer support for each other so that we can go back to our community to save ourselves from continuing to fail. And I don't like to use that word, but I guess it can be used at this moment because that's what we are analyzing. Thank you.
Pastor James. Oh, sorry. Brother Morrison.
I did not grow up in the greater Toronto area. I moved here almost 22 years ago, and I was told how multicultural this area is, as contrasted to where I was before. And yet, 22 years later, I lament. I really don't know my neighbors. And if multicultural means that we can wear garb and head coverings and have beliefs, but not interact with each other authentically, is that truly a definition of multiculturalism? We have had, over the years that I've been in town, what I call one-off multi-faith gatherings. And at those gatherings, I always say to the organizers and my colleagues, I pray that this is not a one-off, but will lead to more getting to know each other, greater activity for the clergy and for the community at large. I'm fearful that tonight could be a one-off. I pray not. but I haven't seen a positive track record in the 22 years I've been in this community, in this tremendous York Center riding. I know only a handful of my non-Jewish clergy colleagues, and even trying to get an interest with MP Sachs leading the way, we have a few clergy of different faiths who are interested. But where is everybody else? There is a lack of interest. We are the minority who are really interested in getting to know each other and getting to build important communal bridges. So to me, this is the challenge, and my hope and my prayer have to end on a positive note, is that this will not be a one-off, that we'll have more programming, and we'll have more people proverbially at the clergy table, and more people in the larger community who are interested in such endeavors.
Thank you so much to each of you. So I'll say this, Rabbi Morrison, Pastor James, Imam Ali, from the first time that we met and the group has grown, I've said to you time and again that our role, whether it's myself or my colleague Minister Ahmed Hussein, our role here is conveners to continue to encourage you and to encourage our communities to build trust. Building trust is hard. It's not easy. And the last few years have resulted in silos of information, whether it's on social media or within our neighborhoods, or silos of the pain that each community has experienced and held on to. And it's my fervent hope, as Minister Hussein said, diversity is a fact in this country, inclusion is a choice. And it's not always easy to choose to trust, to step through that door that you so beautifully described earlier on in our conversation tonight. So my commitment to each of you and to the communities that we have here is that I will keep that door open. And you have that commitment from myself and from my colleagues, because we know how important it is, not just for the healing, but to build the social capital, the social strength that we have here in this country. And this is the hard work, this is the true work, and it's the good work. So as far as I'm concerned, Rabbi Morrison, this will not be a one-off. We will have many more opportunities together. I'm going to, we do have some questions from our audience in Zoom land.
We do not have questions from our audience in Zoom land. They're so blown away by what everyone said, they have nothing to ask, as it turns out.
So then we will open the floor here if there are any questions here, please.
Yeah, please, the microphone, and just a note, as it is Ramadan and it is coming close to time for prayer and iftar, if anyone has to leave to attend mosque or attend prayers or to go eat after, we understand, and of course you are certainly welcome to go whenever you feel comfortable to do so.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. You touched on the minister's comment that diversity is a fact, inclusion takes effort. I've been, I don't want to say accused, posed with a point. We make a lot of effort to get to know each other, get to know our neighbors, whatever the faith, color. But we also believe in our faith, and we often teach our children our faith. And people have posed to me that faith and teaching your children, I'm Jewish, so that if you teach your children Judaism, and you teach them to marry Jewish people, to continue your faith, that you are in fact working against inclusion, because you're setting up a wall that they can't cross. And they can be friends with the neighbor next door who's of a different faith, and they can do things, but there's a line where you can't cross that. And I'm sure that hits all of you in your own religions. And I'm wondering how you respond to that. because you want to teach people not to see those differences, to treat everyone equally, to treat with love and respect. And I've worked with my children, and they have friends of different faith, but at some point there's that line. And I don't have an answer for someone that accuses me of therefore not being inclusive and not being understanding and not working towards a better world. So I'm curious as to how each of you would respond to that
Sure.
comment.
Can I go ahead, please?
Please.
And I do apologize. After this, I do have to leave. That doesn't mean I'm going to say anything bad. But I have to leave to go break fast and be with the congregation. I think we need to, and thank you very much for a very valid question. I think we need to differentiate between faith and culture. And I think many of these challenges happen because of culture. So, you know, when I came to Canada, I wasn't married. That doesn't mean I didn't want to get married. I was still too young. But when I started looking to get married, a congregant asked me, well, what type of person are you looking for? And I said, what do you mean? He's like, isn't there ethnicity? Or I said, no. He's like, are you sure? I said, yes. He said, well, would you marry a woman from this ethnicity? And I said, yes. And he could not believe that, right? So we need to differentiate between faith and culture and customs. And these challenges sometimes come through through customs and culture that has nothing to do with the faith. And so unless faith leaders begin to clarify that with their congregants, you can imagine what's going to happen. And, you know, the last point I want to make, and not on that, but on general terms here, in continuation with Rabbi Morrison's plea and MP Sachs' acknowledgement that this is going to be ongoing, I think we need to make use of these times where we all have things in common, and that's going to help. So I grew up in Guyana in South America, where last Friday our president called for a day of fasting for all the major faith beliefs there. And you can imagine how that was felt. And so I want to add that to what Rabbi Morrison said, and that is, where I grew up, if you stand, you know, in the middle of the road, in front of you is a mosque. On the left of you is a Hindu temple. 2 buildings down was a church. Behind was the cinema. And behind you would be somewhere I don't want to describe. That's how I grew up. And that's what I believe we're in here. And we can do so much because we just need to allow people their freedom, what they believe in, but ensure that we can all coexist, not with cultural barriers, because cultural barriers, unfortunately, is what is creating these problems where you're going to be accused that, okay, you talk about interfaith, but you're just keeping to yourself, right? How about others? And I feel if we can take away the culture and the custom, then people are going to find more freedom along with more compassion for each other as human beings. I want to thank you very much for being here, MP Sachs. Thank you for having me, Rabbi Cutler, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imam Ali, and if I may wish you a Ramadan Mubarak and a Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Pastor James.
Hello. Okay. Excellent question. Thank you so very much. And you know, I'll even complicate it a little bit more because within the Christian faith, there are so many denominations. And so there's always this challenge where on the part of the Bible that says, be not unequally yoked with the unbeliever. And so just like my friend Imam Ali was saying, sometimes it has a lot more to do with religious differences as opposed to cultural differences. And I think that you're talking about religious differences though, aren't you? And so, you know, it is a challenge, but this is not the gospel, this is the gospel according to Judith. Okay? So, when it comes to your faith, it is the foundation, the strength of who you are. Would you agree? And although you can embrace, and we shouldn't be inclusive of all, you know, people having their right to believe in what they believe, it becomes difficult when it comes to choice of marriage. I don't think that means that you don't agree or you don't. It's almost like a agree to disagree type of platform where I can respect what somebody else believes, and because you want to grow your family a certain way doesn't mean that you're excluding.
The word that was thrown to me was racist.
That you're racist. Oh my. I'm sorry that was thrown at you. And unfortunately, some people will view it as that. But you, if I could just speak directly to you for a moment, you know who you are. You know your heart. You know your belief system and your structure. And the God that you serve is one of love. And so, though they may want to throw that at you, all you can do is just, you know, you take it or you leave it. And I would say leave it. You know, and your convictions are who you are. And you have to honor those. But that doesn't mean that you're turning your back on any other brother or sister. I hope that helps. I don't know.
I could easily get off this question by saying David comes to my synagogue, I'll see him tomorrow, but that wouldn't be fair. But I'll be very brief because we're a little bit over our time. So one of the concerns I have in building bridges and having effective multi-faith, multicultural dialogue is use of rhetoric, use of words. And I've learned that to have a meaningful conversation, we have to really define what we mean by certain words. For example, the way some people use the word inclusion, I could interpret as anarchy. And there's a difference between anarchy and being welcoming. I believe in breaking down walls, as I've mentioned, but I do believe that every religious heritage has to have its boundaries. Otherwise, we just become one big humanistic religion. And where are the boundaries between the different branches of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc.? I've always distinguished between the words unity and uniformity. I am opposed to uniformity, where we are coerced by those around us to be a one-size-fits-all. Unity allows for that diversity, that distinctiveness, but in a way in which we all care for each other's well-being. So part of this for me is not just about the example of marriage. I think it's a larger conversation. It's about the uses of terminology and when to have boundaries and when not to have boundaries. But we have to first understand the use of rhetoric that some people use very maliciously and politically.
Thank you so much. I know there's another question. However, we'll circle back with you. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce, he'll be joining us by screen, Aaron Lightstone. Aaron Lightstone is a musician and a music therapist. He's also a very old and dear friend of mine from many, many years ago, back from childhood. And in addition to being a Juno Award-winning musician and artist, he is such a special human being in that he approaches music from a place of healing, but also collaborates in bringing world music to his work with instruments and melodies and the spirit of music from so many parts of the world and weaves them together so beautifully. So I am so honored that he was able to kind of join us towards the end of tonight's discussion to bring some hope through healing in music and some thoughts for himself as a music therapist of how music really stirs the soul and heals the heart. So if we could patch him through onto the screen.
Hear me and see me okay?
Yeah, we hear you. Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
Great to see you.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. What a wonderful discussion, very thought-provoking, heavy, very heavy in a good way. I'm going to play one song to sort of reflect that heaviness, and one song that maybe lightens it a little bit. And I do want to say a few words just about my work as a I call it intercultural musician with the band that I'm known for playing in called Jaffa Road, which blends Jewish music with Indian music, with jazz, with rock, and several other forms from around the world, and really tries to be this, or can be, a bridge between cultures and between understanding. Our music is rooted in Jewish texts, but we've had the honor and the privilege of playing our music all across Canada, even in places where there's in like Nunavut, where there's almost no Jewish people, but we're playing Jewish music and we're getting audience responses, and we can see how music touches people very, very, very deeply across cultures, because the message might be universal. In my work as a music therapist, I see every day the healing power of music. It can be a bit of a cliche, but it's also very, very real, that active listening, active participation, and active engaging in music truly brings people together and can heal all kinds of illnesses, injuries, hurts, and traumas. And we see this in the going back as far as we know in human history. Every human culture ever studied, ever known, has had music. And in fact, some of the oldest pieces of technology that have been discovered by archaeologists are musical instruments. I've got a picture of a bone flute found in a cave in Germany that's been carbon dated at almost 50,000 years old. So this predates agriculture, predates writing, predates cities as we know it. People had musical instruments. Anyway, it was very difficult for me to choose just two pieces, and I didn't really choose until I heard what was being said. I'm going to start with something in Hebrew by one of my Oud teachers, Yair Dalal, introduced this traditional prayer for healing and for peace. O dweller in the heavens, see our plight. Answer our urgent plea. Give us peace, give us tranquility in our abodes. Grant us peace in our land. Let there be an abundance in the world, and grant peace to our kingdoms. Eloheinu sheba shamayim, re betoch Eloheinu sheba shamayim, shet shavatenu, shet shalom beinenu, make peace between us. Shet shalva be'armenotenu. Eloheinu sheba shamayim, ten shalom Ten Shava Ba'olam, Ten Shalom B'malchuyo. Now, I mentioned, in addition to my work as in Jaffa Road and in music therapy, I'm also what you can call a community music professional. I do community music programs and working on one right now with a group called the Bliss Eye Band, which is a group of adults with very complex physical disabilities. I teach them how to play music together with virtual instruments on iPads. And we're working on a recording project right now. We're working on this song that was written by a dear friend of mine, Drew Gonslaves, who lives in Ottawa. He's in a band called Kobo Town. He's a wonderful calypsonian. And Imam Ali mentioned Guyana, that he's from there. And I fell in love with this beautiful calypso music, in part on one of my many trips to Guyana. And I said I would play something that reflected the heaviness and maybe something to lighten the mood a little bit. This song is a calypso song. It's a bit of could say maybe it's a social commentary. It's a little bit satirical, and it sort of maybe poking fun at the differences between us to show that the things that divide us are kind of insignificant and often based on sometimes some baseless misunderstandings. So this is called The War Between Is and Ought by my dear friend, Drew Gonslaves. Come, friends, and let me regale you with a strange and tragic tale about a long, cruel war fought between the land of Is and Ought. No one knows how it began, the strife which down the centuries ran, but all agreed across the divide it was started by the other side. While the ambitious king of Is, he claimed all land and sea as his, no less a dominion was sought by the rival king of Ought. Is claimed to fight for the real, Ought wanted to promote the ideal, and each rained fire down on field and town to prove the other wrong. Is said my rival Ought is in hopeless delusion caught. He's dreaming of things as they ought to be. He's lost his grip on reality. He would burn this world down without a trace, not a thing to put in its place. Let him talk his talk about revolution. He can't say how it would be done. Ought then said Is, I would have you know, he's a blind slave of the status quo. His claim to work with what really is only allows misery to persist. His charts and graphs amount to a lie. They never answer the question why. He can talk his talk of trends and laws. He cannot explain the cause. So war raged between can and should, what is and what is good, where love and truth made common cause. They now sued for a divorce. Nothing was left untouched by the fray. The whole world read the threat of our days, and now we see the whole wide world was caught in a mad war between is and not. How the whole wide world was caught in a mad war between is and not. How the whole wide world was caught in the mad war between is and odd.
Aaron, thank you so much.
Pleasure to be
This
here.
was such a joy to have you join us and end us on a happy note, with a sense of, music in our hearts as we walk out of this room or close down our Zoom screens. I want to thank all of our panelists who've joined us. I know Imam Ali had to leave, but Pastor Judith James, Rabbi Morrison, Rabbi Cutler, you have chosen to walk a careful and important line with me down this road of bringing our communities together. It's not easy work, but it is work that is full of love. It is full of a sense of commitment to our communities and to each other. And I just want to share tremendous gratitude to each of you. There have been many meetings, many discussions. There's a lot that happens to come to make this time happen, and behind the scenes. And I'd like to give actually a special thanks, he's in the audience, to my staff, Alessandro, from our office. Alessandro is our head of outreach, and he coordinates many a meeting, takes copious notes, links everyone together, and really you came to me asking for help to bring this group to come into creation, and it's really thanks to Sandro and our team over at the constituency for this. So thank you to each of you for your leadership in bringing us here. I'm going to pass off the last word to Rabbi Cutler.
And my last few words are thank you to you and to your office and for all that you put into this. And finally, thank you to all of those who have spent the late afternoon and early evening with us here at Adventist Congregation, both here at 37 South Warren Avenue and here on Zoom. We wish you all a good night, and whatever festival you may be celebrating, or not at all, we hope that the next few weeks and the month ahead are one of happiness and one of peace. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Good job.